All right. All right. Can I confirm if you guys can hear me, please? Can I confirm if I'm clear enough? Someone?
Yes.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Leonida. All right, so let's start. Like I said, this is switching concept. It's a very, very brief chapter. Most of the things are things we had actually learned in the CCNA 1 course. And I hope I've already enrolled all of you in the course, so everyone should be able to see the concepts. Now, so for switching concept, like I said, it's a very brief concept. And basically, we are going to explain how frames are forwarded in a switch network. And of course, you remember the switch forwarding methods, okay? We had store and forward as the first one, switching, and we did explain, all the stuff around frame forwarding methods. Now, and then of course, we'll compare a collision domain and a broadcast domain, and that is going to be very important for the next chapter that we are going to talk about. And so in terms of frame forwarding, we come to two terms here, the ingress interface or ingress port, which is like the incoming port, and the egress port or the exit port. So those are just, normal terms additionally to make us to be able to understand, whatever it is that we are talking about. So what I want us to do right now is that I want us to just, start learning and see that, everything is actually okay. Now, so to start us off, let's get to remember that we initially had talked about the MAC address and the MAC address table. And we did talk about, how the switch uses the MAC address table with the MAC addresses to do the job that it does, So the MAC address table is very important in a switch. And as the switch connects with the MAC address, the MAC addresses, and of course the MAC address table, normally the switch records the source MAC address. Okay, the switch records the source MAC address and the source port numbers. And when a frame leaves the MAC address, or the port, it can never come back to the same port. I think we did talk about that at some point. And so that is also just important to note. Now, moving forward, we know that the MAC address table has another name, which is called the content addressable memory table, the CAM table. Okay, and so normally before the switch can make any forwarding decisions, it must always learn what interface that the destination is located. Okay, and the switch will always store the source MAC addresses and the source port numbers on the MAC address table. In terms of the switching domains, this is very important, and I want you guys to note. We talk about a collision domain, and we'll talk about a broadcast domain. Now, what is a collision domain? Now, the link between the PC and the switch here, okay? Any link between a PC and a switch here, this is what we call a collision domain, all right? The link between a PC and the switch, any PC connected to a switch, that is a collision domain. We know that we have talked about full duplex and half duplex. In half duplex, the PC can only send or receive frames. It cannot do both of them. Either the PC is sending or it is receiving, not doing so both of them concurrently. In full duplex, the PC can be sending as it is receiving. It can be sending as it is receiving. And most devices nowadays actually work on full duplex, except the hubs, which is a traditional device, a legacy device, and wireless networks also work on half duplexes. So normally collisions will normally occur wherever there's a half duplex. Wherever there's half duplex communication, then collisions will always occur. And that's what we call this a collision domain. Call that a collision domain. Now, it's also important to note that apart from the collision domain, we also have what is called a broadcast domain. We also have what is called a broadcast domain. Now, for the broadcast domain, we do have, you can look at this diagram we're having here. We have, let me just zoom this in. We have a switch connected to a switch here, right? And the first switch is H1 is connected to 5 devices. There's a server here. There's 4 PCs here, and the switch is still connected to switch S2. Switch S2 is also connected to a server, connected to 4 more PCs over here, and of course connected to switch S1. All right. Now, it is important to note that remember I said that a switch is a broadcasting device. A switch is a broadcasting device, and wherever a switch sends any message, okay, or wherever a switch receives a message from any of the PCs, the switch will always broadcast to all the links except where it has come from. So if the message is coming from this PC here, let's say this is PC1, the message will come to the switch. The switch is gonna send it to all the ports except where it is coming from, which means it will go to the server, it will go to this PC, it will go to this PC here, it will go to this PC, and it will also go to switch S2. Switch S2 receives that message. Switch S2 must also broadcast this to the server, PC, PC, PC here, of course, with the PC here. Now, the switch will always do that broadcast, and that is something that is very common for a switch. So, and the same thing, of course, will happen here. This switch will always broadcast a message. Now, let me say this. Let's say we had 100 switches connected together in this manner. If one switch receives a message out of the 100 switches, all the 100 switches with all the devices connected to them are going to hear that message. So the extent that a frame can travel within the same network is what is called a broadcast domain. To what extent can a switch broadcast a message or a frame? Okay. Now, the only device that blocks broadcast from being forwarded is a router. So a router does not forward broadcast. So if you had 1,000 switches and at the end of it, all they are connected to a router, all the switches will forward the broadcast, but the broadcast will stop at the router level. So only there are 3 devices will always break that broadcast. Okay. So the whole of this, that will be called a broadcast domain. And this broadcast sometimes they are not healthy for the network because too many broadcasts on a network can cause network congestions and poor network performance. That's when you realize that the network is very slow and the browser is always loading and loading. So as network administrators, we are supposed to sort out network issues. And sometimes the users in the network will be complaining that the network is very slow. Now, you as a network admin, you need to speak a different language. Don't say the network is very slow. You need to find out what is making the network slow. Sometimes it's just these broadcasts that are, causing that particular problem. How can we be able to prevent these network congestions or slowness? One of the first one is just when you buy your switches, make sure that your switches have higher speeds. All right, fast port speeds will always prevent those congestion. Make sure you buy switches with a faster internet switching, and this is going, of course, to improve the performance of the network. Switches with large buffers. You know that when a switch receives a frame, the frame is always temporarily stored within the buffer memory. So switches with the large buffer memories will experience very little congestion because they can be able to temper. It's like a waiting room. So if you have a small waiting room, you'll have more congestion. If you have a bigger waiting room for like in a hospital or something like that, you'll have, more smooth way of managing your network. And then port density, as I've told you guys before, make sure you have a switch that has more ports. The total number of ports, of course, that's what we call a port density. Now, having talked about this, let me just mention one thing, because this is going to help us. You realize that when this switch here, when the switch receives information from one of the devices, it's going to broadcast it. Why? Because originally, normally the switch has only one VLAN, and you and I know that VLAN. That VLAN is called VLAN 1, and it is also called the default VLAN. And VLAN is just not very far from a LAN, and LAN is local area network. So VLAN is virtual LAN. So it is still a LAN, only that it is virtual this time around. Now we are going to talk about the next topic is called VLAN, virtual LAN. How can we be able to create more VLANs? We have only been talking about VLAN 1, the default VLAN. So, and that means that's what makes the switch to broadcast the messages to all the ports that are currently active. So we are going to answer so many questions. When a switch is configured with other VLANs, how does it handle traffic? Okay, so let's just conclude this, and let's now talk about VLANs so that we get to see what